Hello, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. This video is a little bit different than the videos that I normally create. Normally, my content is based around Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but my husband and I recently got married. We got married 2 weeks ago, and we had a DIY backyard wedding. I want to create this wedding series for you guys because last summer when I first started planning, I spent all of my free time watching YouTube videos and listening to podcasts trying to figure out how the heck to put together a backyard wedding myself. There's a lot that goes into it, and I have learned so much over the past year, and I want to share all of my tips, all of my tricks, all of the research that I did on how to create a successful, beautiful, intimate wedding day that you can truly enjoy. Our wedding turned out to be everything that I dreamed of. It was the most wonderful day that I could have ever imagined having, and I want to help you guys create the same wedding day for yourselves. Throughout this series, you are going to get all of the details that I can possibly think of to help you create this super special day. In this video, we are going to go over just the general checklist of everything that you need for a DIY backyard wedding, kind of covering all of your major things, your major essentials that you need. So I'm really excited and I have so much information to give, so let's get chatting. So what should be on your DIY backyard, sort of budget-friendly wedding checklist? One of the first things that I started researching, and I think that this is one of the biggest things that you possibly need for the day of, is all of your rentals. If you're hosting a backyard wedding, then obviously it is not a real wedding venue that has everything already laid out for you, so you have to literally get everything yourself. The first thing that I'm going to say is I would 100% recommend getting all of your rentals from the same company. It will save you the biggest headache later on. In your research, you might find that sourcing different rentals from different companies might be more cost effective, but I'm here to tell you that closer to the wedding day, the most important thing that you're going to want is just being at peace and being calm and being happy, and having all of your rentals from one company may not seem like the biggest deal, but it's just a tiny detail in this whole journey of wedding planning that will just make your life so much easier. So what are some things that you need to rent from a rental company? If your wedding is outside, you need a tent. And you might be thinking the same thing that I thought when I first started planning, and that was, I do not want a tent. I want my whole wedding to be outside. I just want to be running through the trees and the woods. I do not want these ugly tents on the property. Those were literally my thoughts. But if you go through a reputable company, if you go through a company that specializes in weddings, the tents can actually be really beautiful. I ended up renting 2 tents. I rented a 40 by 40 for the reception area, and that was just a gigantic monstrosity of a tent that easily fit the 65 people that we had. And then for a separate part of the yard, kind of like for the cocktail hour, for the dancing portion, we had the DJ under there. I rented a 20 by 40 tent, so it was about half the size, but it was still plenty big, still had plenty of room. And I actually ended up really loving that these tents sort of created different sections of the backyard. It made you feel like you were in different rooms in this outdoor space. Why else is a tent really helpful for an outdoor wedding? And we will talk about this a little bit later on, and that is it provides an enclosure if it rains and you don't have access to an indoor home or barn or anything. It provides a place for you to get shelter if it starts raining on your wedding day. The next thing that you're going to need to rent is all of the tables, and that includes the tables that your guests are going to sit at during the reception. It includes the table that you and your partner are going to sit at, which is usually called the sweetheart table. If you're opting for a buffet style of dinner, you are going to need buffet tables. You will need a table for dessert, and also a nice little add-on is cocktail tables. I rented probably about, I think, 10 cocktail tables. I had some underneath that second smaller tent. I had some just kind of placed around the yard. I had one next to the bar. I used one for the ceremony area where we had put like our vows and the rings on. I think cocktail tables are a really nice addition. They give people a place to put their drinks, to put their appetizer plate, to lean on when they're talking to other people. It gives people a place to just sort of gather around and talk to each other. If you're having a bar, you will also need a table for the the bar. For this, you could just rent another 6-foot long table. I opted for a really cute bar. There's a little bit more expensive, but our bar was sort of in the center of everything. I knew that obviously it was going to be a place that people gathered around, so I really wanted it to be a little bit more than just a folding table. I wanted it to fit the aesthetic of our wedding, which was sort of like a rustic, woodsy wedding. So I opted to rent a whiskey barrel bar. So it had 2 giant barrels and then just this wooden plank that went on top of it. But however you wish to set up your bar, just keep in mind that you do need some sort of table for it. You are also going to need to rent chairs. Now, I would highly recommend getting 2 sets of chairs, 1 set for the ceremony and 1 set for the reception. I know sometimes it can be a little bit more cost effective to just take the chairs from the ceremony and then use them for the reception. But if you don't have a huge team of people working your wedding, then you don't really want to grab your dad and your brothers and your best friends to take 65, 75 chairs and then move them to a separate area in the yard in the middle of your wedding. Overall, chairs are not that expensive to rent, so I would absolutely recommend getting 2 sets just to make everybody's life easier. Another rental expense that I'm just gonna throw in there and just to kind of make you aware of it, this is not something that I wanted when we first started planning. I did not want this at all, actually. I didn't think we needed it. I didn't think that it looked good, and that is bathroom trailers. Now, looking back, post-wedding, I would 100% recommend renting bathroom trailers. Google's gonna tell you that if you have a wedding of like 20 or more people, you need a bathroom trailer. And I would agree. At first, I just had the idea that all of our guests can just go inside the house and use the bathroom on the first floor. I was like, oh, we only have 60 people and every single person we know personally, like it's no big deal. But 60 people is still a good amount of people to have at your home, and not everyone might feel comfortable going inside of a house trying to find a restroom. It'll just make everything a little easier and I think a little nicer for your guests if they have this sort of big bathroom trailer. And I might add, the bathrooms are really nice and they can just feel comfortable using that versus going inside of somebody else's home and trying to find the bathroom. You are going to have to rent the dinnerware and the cutlery, the plates, the cups, the wine glasses, the beer glasses, forks, knives, spoons, everything. Coffee cups, appetizer plates, dessert plates, everything that you would find at a regular venue, at a regular restaurant, you're going to have to rent. When I first inquired with the rental company that we went with, I had added all of those items to our item list, and it was very expensive. And then I also found out that we would have to return all of the dinnerware clean. Was that something that I wanted to do? Absolutely not. Is that something that I would want to then place on the shoulders of our servers? Absolutely not. So what did I do? We went with disposables. That might not be your style, and that's totally okay. I 100% did not care. And that's why DIY weddings are so great, because you can literally do whatever the heck you want. I spent a long time, I think a little too long, researching and trying to find really nice disposable dinnerware. And I ended up with purchasing them from Amazon, and they were just plain white round plates, dinner plates, appetizer plates, dessert plates. All of the cutlery was disposable, all of the glassware was disposable. And honestly, I feel like for a backyard wedding, it works. It's totally fine. No one cares. And like I said, if that's not your style, if you can't imagine having disposables at your wedding day, that's totally fine. But if you're kind of on the fence and you're wondering if having throwaway dinner plates and cutlery and glassware is tacky, it is absolutely not, and it's gonna look great, and no one freaking cares. And the last thing that you might think about renting, and I should have said this a little bit earlier when we talked about the tables, but you will need to rent the linens. You will also need to have napkins. I actually ended up not renting the napkins. I purchased the napkins from Tablecloth Factory, and they were so cheap, and they were, you know, your fancy dinner napkins, and they were just fine. I threw them all away after the wedding. I still have actually a ton left over. I bought way more than I needed. But for me, they were just a little bit more cost effective than renting. Now looking back, would it have made a huge difference just to rent them? I don't know. But at the time, they were super cheap and I was really happy with the way that they looked. There's a couple of things that I added on later in the planning process because I started freaking out. What if this happens and what if we need this? So I ended up adding on a second tent. When I first booked this company, I only had one tent, and then literally like 2 months before the wedding, I was like, oh my gosh, what if it rains and the only tent we have is for the reception? So I ended up adding on a second tent, and then I also started freaking out about what if it got cold at night, because we were upstate New York where we're in the mountains. It gets a little chillier at night. It was only in mid-May. So like 3 weeks before the wedding, I added on propane and heaters, and we ended up not using them. It was like 75, 80 degrees during the day, and I think everybody was just really warmed up from drinking and dancing, and we had a fire pit, and let me tell you, I was sweating the whole time. So we absolutely didn't even touch those heaters, but I am happy that I had them, just in case. The next really important thing that you're going to have to think about, and we started thinking about this right away, and that is the food. I will admit, this is really the only thing that my husband cared about in the planning process. Everything else, he left up to me. I informed him on some of the things, but he really couldn't give a darn about anything else except for the food. We are big foodies, we love to eat, and we wanted to make sure that our guests enjoyed every kind of food that we had. Because I don't know about you, but a lot of times when you go to these big wedding venues, the food isn't that great. We just really wanted to provide a wonderful experience for our guests, and a big part of that is the food. We ended up going with a barbecue restaurant that was about an hour away from where we had the wedding. We visited the restaurant about maybe 7 or so months before we had the wedding, and we just went there for dinner. We met the owner, we sat at the bar, and we got a little bit of everything on the menu, and it was delicious. We had just great vibes from the restaurant in general. Everybody that walked into the restaurant, the bartender knew, everybody was a repeat customer, the owner was super laid back, and that was just our style. So we knew that this was gonna be a really great place. And to make it even better, they have done a ton of weddings, they do a ton of catering, so that made us feel really good. Something along with the food and your catering, if you're having a backyard wedding and you're not having it at an actual venue, I would absolutely recommend hiring some staff to act as the servers, to act as the bartender. Thankfully, the restaurant that we went with was able to provide a bunch of staff for us. We had a couple of guys on site cooking, we had a couple people behind the buffet, and then for the bar, my idea was to have a self-serve bar, but they were really nice and they had one of the servers stand behind the bar, and he was absolutely wonderful. He was so attentive, he was refilling people's drinks, and he actually stepped up and built the fire for the fire pit. I'm going to link the restaurant that we used in the description box below because I just could not recommend them enough. And if you're in New York, in the Hudson Valley area, they were just an absolute pleasure, and I just wish them all the best for their business because they were just so wonderful. We got so many compliments on them, and I would use them over and over and over again. If you're having a really small wedding, like maybe under 20 people, and you have an aunt and a cousin and a sister-in-law who are really great cooks and they want to cook everything for you, that's great. But if you're having more people than that, I would absolutely recommend finding a place where you just love the food and a place that can also provide you with some staff to sort of run the food show for the day. The next item on the checklist, I was very undecided about for a long time. I was convinced that I didn't need a person for this, I could do everything myself, but let me tell you, this was probably the best decision that I made throughout the whole process. That is to hire a day of coordinator. I watched a ton of videos and listened to a ton of podcasts trying to figure out if I really needed a day of coordinator, and I'm here to tell you, you do. Like I said, if you're having a wedding of like maybe just a really intimate ceremony, 10, 15 people, you might not need a day of coordinator because it's just gonna be a really small, intimate ceremony. But with 65 people, that's still a good amount of people in the space, and there are a lot of moving parts. I ended up using a friend that I have been friends with for about 12 years. And my day of coordinator, her name is Melanie, and she is just bubbly and she's beautiful and she's so friendly. And she's just one of those people that was perfect for this kind of job. She's someone that works with people all the time. She was the perfect person and she just made my life so wonderful the day of the wedding. She was my right-hand man. She tied all of the loose ends the morning of so that I did not have to lift a finger. She ran the freaking show the day of. And I truly don't think that this wedding would have been as wonderful and as perfect as it was if it wasn't for her. She did an amazing job, and I recommend so much trying to find someone that you trust and that you want to be around to sort of just run the show the day of. Number 4 on the checklist, you need music. Originally, I thought that I was just going to play music on my laptop and put it through a speaker and everything was just gonna work out and everything was gonna be fine. I created multiple playlists on Spotify for every different part of our wedding. I 100% did not want to hire a DJ. No offense to any DJs who might watch this, but my husband and I typically can't stand DJs. We usually can't stand music at weddings. To be honest, music at weddings is usually pretty terrible. I think that wedding DJs are pretty corny. MCs are pretty corny. I think that all of the music is the same. I think that they use the same playlist for every wedding known to man. And it was really important to us to have good music. We love to dance and we wanted music that we wanted to dance to. So in the beginning, hiring a DJ was an absolute no-go. And then later on, a couple of months before the wedding, I realized that I needed to purchase a whole sound system. My brother is an audio engineer and he was like, Kim, why didn't you talk to me about this months ago? And I was like, I don't know. I thought we could just buy a cheap speaker and everything would be fine. And he was like, it might be, or it might not be fine. So I had a minor freak out moment and I started just kind of wondering like, how is this all gonna work? So very sporadically, I hired a DJ and they were absolutely wonderful. I was able to create a playlist that they pulled the music from. They were familiar with backyard weddings and they did a ton of them. The last thing that I had to worry about was if the music is gonna play, if the microphones worked, and if the sound was going to be heard in all different sections of the yard. The less things that you have to stress about during your wedding, the happier you will be. And if you can just hire good people to do all of these jobs, you are going to be so happy. The next thing that you're going to want to add to your list is someone to document the day, and that is a photographer or videographer. When you're starting to plan your backyard wedding, you're going to be doing a lot of research, right? And you might come across some blog posts or maybe even some YouTube videos of people just suggesting that friends and family can take photos on their iPhones. That's the worst advice I think that you can give someone. I know you're on a budget. And I know that you want to be as cost effective as possible. But having this beautiful day that you have worked so hard to create to not be professionally documented, I think you are going to regret it immensely. It's one thing to have regular photos. It's another thing to have professional photos to truly capture the details, the emotions, just everything about a wedding, and to create this beautiful memory of your special day. Now, I'm not saying you have to hire both. We didn't. I didn't have a videographer. Photographers can really set the mood. They can either break the energy in the room or they can add to it. When I'm doing makeup for a wedding and a photographer and videographer walk in the room and sometimes they can be bossy, sometimes their energy can just be too much. It can really throw off the way that the rest of the day goes. So one, I would really recommend hiring a photographer, and two, I would interview that photographer. I would have phone calls. I would try to meet them in person. I would recommend not only making sure that they do beautiful work, but also that your personalities match, that the just kind of person that they are is the kind of person that you want to be around on your wedding day. And then just a couple of last small things. You're obviously going to need invitations, you are going to need a seating chart, and you are going to need, it's not like 100% a necessity, but I would recommend it. You're going to want some sort of activity for people to do during your backyard wedding. So let's first talk about invitations. My husband and I opted for for online invitations. Guys, it's 2022. You can do whatever you want. And if you don't want to have formal mailed invitations, you don't have to. Some people might not agree with it. Some people might think it's tacky. I'm the kind of person that I knew what I wanted and I knew what I didn't want, and I literally could not have a care in the world what other people thought about it. The company that I went with for my wedding website, my invitations, and the RSVP, everything was in one. I went with withjoy.com. Again, I will put their website down below. It's free, it's easy, everything is in one place, and you will save yourself a lot of money. The next thing that you're going to want to have is some sort of seating chart. When I first started planning, I was like, I don't need a seating chart. People can just sit wherever they want and everything's gonna be fine. And then I was like, no. Kim, you need a seating chart. We didn't have specific spots for people at the tables, but we at least had a table for someone to go to. It makes your guests feel more comfortable knowing that they have a specific table for them. We grouped people together that we knew were friends, that we knew at least knew each other. So I think you absolutely need one. And the last thing is some sort of activity for your guests to do. Remember, it's a backyard wedding. It's a little bit more casual. You want your guests to have fun. That was the whole point of this wedding. I wanted people to have fun. I wanted people to have a good time, because so many times you go to a regular wedding and it's kind of boring. I wanted people to drink, I wanted people to eat, and I wanted them to just have a freaking good time. So right after our ceremony, the cocktail hour started, and I actually extended the cocktail hour. You can do that. You can do whatever you want. The cocktail hour is usually the best part, and it's usually the quickest part. So I didn't want it to be just an hour. I had like a 2.5-hour cocktail hour. There was plenty of food, there was plenty of drinks, and there were plenty of activities for people to do. We had a fire pit, we had giant Jenga, we had cornhole, we had beer pong, we had appetizers on a table, we had passed around hors d'oeuvres. There was plenty for everybody to do. This is your wedding day. Make it your own. Make it into something that you've always wanted. Personally, I knew that I didn't want people just sitting at their reception table the whole wedding. That's boring. I wanted people walking around the yard. I wanted people enjoying the space, and that's why I spaced everything out. And thankfully, I had the kind of yard to do that. So take advantage of what you have. Think about what would make a wedding fun for you and create it. Your wedding day doesn't have to be completely run the same as every other kind of wedding day. It's DIY. You can do it how you want it in whatever way you want it. And that's what makes it so exciting, and that's what makes it so personal. So I hope you guys found this wedding checklist helpful. Like I said, this was just sort of all of those major essentials I think that you need to host a backyard wedding. There will be plenty of other videos to come with much more detailed information, little things that you need, little things that you might not think of to have a backyard wedding. If you found this video helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment, let me know if I missed anything. Leave a comment with any questions that you have if you are in the process of planning your DIY wedding. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification button so that you don't miss any other wedding videos that I post. And until the next video, I will see you guys next time.